Let me ask you something that might surprise you. What if the foods sitting in your refrigerator right now, the ones with low fat printed on the label in big green letters, are actually the reason you can't lose weight? What if healthy has been lying to you? I'm not talking about junk food. I'm not talking about fast food or soda or anything you already know is bad for you. I'm talking about the yogurt you have with breakfast, the peanut butter on your whole grain toast, the light salad dressing you use because you're watching your waistline. I see this every single week in my practice. Patients over 60 doing everything right, eating low fat, reading labels, avoiding butter, and they still can't lose weight. In many cases, they're gaining it, especially around the belly. And when we dig into exactly what they're eating, the pattern is always the same. Today I'm going to show you exactly what food manufacturers replace fat with when they make a product low fat. And I'm going to explain why your body at 60 reacts to those substitutes very differently than it would have at 35 or 40. Stay with me, because what you learn in the next 35 minutes might completely change the way you shop for food. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim, and welcome back to Senior Health Review, the channel dedicated entirely to evidence-based health and wellness for adults 60 and over. If you're new here, I've spent the last 2 decades working with older adults, and one of the most common frustrations I hear is exactly what I described just now. Doctor, I eat healthy, I do everything right, why can't I lose weight? And my answer, increasingly, is this: it depends on what you mean by healthy. Because the definition of healthy that most Americans over 60 were taught, the one that says fat is bad, low fat is good, calories in equals calories out, that definition is outdated. And for your body specifically, at this stage of life, it can actually work against you. Here's what's changed physiologically after 60. First, your insulin sensitivity decreases. That means your body doesn't process sugars and refined carbohydrates as efficiently as it once did. When blood sugar spikes, your body releases insulin, and insulin is a fat storage hormone. The higher and more frequent those spikes, the more fat your body tends to store, particularly visceral fat. That's the deep belly fat that's linked to heart disease, diabetes, and inflammation. Second, your muscle mass declines. Muscle is metabolically active tissue. It burns calories even at rest. As muscle mass decreases with age, your resting metabolic rate slows down. This means your body needs fewer total calories, but more importantly, it becomes less tolerant of low-quality carbohydrates. Third, your satiety hormones, the hormones that tell your brain, "I'm full, stop eating," become less responsive over time. Now here's why all of this matters for today's topic. When food manufacturers remove fat from a product, they have to replace it with something. Fat carries flavor, texture, and mouthfeel. Without it, food tastes terrible and falls apart. So they replace it with sugars, refined starches, artificial thickeners, and chemical flavorings. And for a 60-year-old body with decreased insulin sensitivity and a slower metabolism, that substitution is a metabolic disaster. Let's go through the 6 biggest offenders. The first food on our list is one of the most popular health foods in America: low-fat yogurt. Now I want to be clear, plain yogurt, even low-fat, is not the villain here. The problem is flavored low-fat yogurt. The strawberry kind, the peach kind, the vanilla kind, the ones that say only 100 calories on the front. Here's what happens when manufacturers remove fat from yogurt. Full-fat yogurt has a naturally rich, creamy taste. When you strip out the fat, you're left with something that tastes sour and watery. Nobody buys that. So to compensate, they add sugar, sometimes high fructose corn syrup, sometimes evaporated cane juice, sometimes fruit concentrates that are essentially liquid sugar with a healthier name. How much sugar are we talking about? A typical 6-ounce container of flavored, low-fat yogurt contains anywhere from 15 to 26 grams of sugar. For reference, a Krispy Kreme glazed donut has about 10 grams. Some of those fruit-on-the-bottom yogurts have more sugar than a candy bar. Now let's talk about what that sugar does in your body, specifically your body over 60. When you eat that much sugar first thing in the morning, your blood glucose rises sharply. Your pancreas responds by releasing a surge of insulin. Insulin pushes that sugar into your cells for energy. But if your cells are already full, or if you have any degree of insulin resistance, that excess sugar gets converted into triglycerides and stored as fat. But here's the part that really gets my patience when I explain it. Sugar, especially fructose, which is common in these yogurts, actively stimulates the hunger hormone ghrelin. So after eating a 100-calorie, low-fat yogurt for breakfast, many people are hungrier an hour later than if they had eaten nothing at all. You end up consuming more total calories throughout the day, not fewer. And for those of you managing prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or even just elevated fasting blood sugar, which is extremely common after 60, this morning sugar spike sets the metabolic tone for your entire day. What should you eat instead? Full-fat, plain Greek yogurt. Yes, full fat. A 6-ounce serving of full-fat, plain Greek yogurt has roughly 5 to 8 grams of naturally occurring lactose, that's the milk sugar, and 0 added sugar. It's high in protein, which supports muscle preservation. And the fat content triggers your satiety hormones, so you genuinely feel satisfied. If you want sweetness, add half a cup of fresh or frozen berries. You'll get natural sugar along with fiber, which slows glucose absorption, exactly the opposite of what those syrupy, fruit-flavored yogurts do. The label says low fat. Your body says high sugar. At 60, that's the trade-off you're actually making. The second food is something many of my patients are shocked by, because peanut butter feels like such a wholesome American staple. Reduced fat peanut butter. Real, natural peanut butter is a genuinely excellent food. It contains monounsaturated fats, the same type of heart-healthy fat found in olive oil. It's got protein, fiber, magnesium, and vitamin E. And importantly, the fat content makes it filling. A tablespoon or two of natural peanut butter keeps you satisfied for hours because fat digests slowly and suppresses appetite. So what happens when you remove that fat? The product would be almost unworkable. Peanut flour doesn't spread, doesn't have the right texture, and has none of the satisfying mouthfeel. So manufacturers add fillers. The most common one is maltodextrin. Now, I need you to remember this word, maltodextrin, because it shows up in a lot of low-fat and diet products. Maltodextrin is a highly processed starch, typically derived from corn, wheat, or potato. It's used as a filler, a thickener, and a texture agent. And here's the critical fact. Maltodextrin has a glycemic index of 85 to 105. For comparison, pure table sugar has a glycemic index of 65. White bread is around 75. Maltodextrin spikes your blood sugar faster and higher than regular sugar. It's technically classified as a carbohydrate, not a sugar, which is why it doesn't always show up prominently on the nutrition facts panel. But metabolically, it behaves worse than sugar. For someone over 60 with any degree of insulin resistance, and studies suggest that a significant portion of adults in this age group have some level of insulin dysfunction, whether diagnosed or not, maltodextrin is a metabolic grenade. And what have you gained by switching to reduced fat peanut butter? You've saved about 1.5 grams of fat per serving. Fat that was healthy for you, fat that was keeping you full. And in its place, you've added a substance that hits your bloodstream like a sugar bomb. What should you do instead? Buy natural peanut butter. Look at the ingredient list. It should say peanuts and maybe salt. That's it. If you see sugar, corn syrup solids, hydrogenated oils, or maltodextrin, put it back on the shelf. Yes, natural peanut butter separates. The oil rises to the top. That's not a flaw. That's what real food does. Stir it, store it upside down, refrigerate it after opening. It takes 10 seconds and it's worth it. Your peanut butter should have one ingredient: peanuts. This one might be the most ironic mistake of all, because the entire reason most people put low-fat dressing on their salad is to eat healthier. Here's what actually happens. When you remove oil from salad dressing, you have to add something to replace the texture, the consistency, and the flavor. That something is usually a combination of sugar, modified food starch, and sodium, sometimes in quite substantial amounts. Many fat-free dressings have 4 to 6 grams of sugar per 2 tablespoon serving, and many people use 3 or 4 times that amount. But here's the deeper problem, the one that most people don't know about. Your salad is loaded with fat-soluble vitamins. We're talking about vitamin A from carrots and leafy greens, vitamin K from spinach, kale, and arugula, vitamin D and vitamin E from various vegetables. And we call these fat-soluble for an important reason. Your body can only absorb them in the presence of dietary fat. Without fat in your meal, these vitamins pass right through your digestive system, largely unabsorbed. A 2004 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition measured the absorption of carotenoids, the compounds that become vitamin A, from salads eaten with fat-free, low-fat, and full-fat dressings. The result? Nearly zero carotenoid absorption with fat-free dressing. Significantly higher absorption with fat-containing dressings. You could eat the most nutrient-dense salad ever assembled: spinach, kale, beets, carrots, peppers, the works. And if you top it with fat-free dressing, you're absorbing a fraction of its nutritional value. Now think about what's particularly important for adults over 60. Vitamin D is critical for bone density, immune function, and muscle health, and deficiency is already epidemic in older Americans. Vitamin K is essential for bone metabolism and cardiovascular health. You need these vitamins, and your salad is supposed to be delivering them. But low-fat dressing is sabotaging the whole mission. What should you use instead? Olive oil and vinegar, or olive oil and fresh lemon juice. 1 to 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil contains healthy monounsaturated fats that do exactly what fat is supposed to do: unlock the nutrients in your vegetables. Add some Dijon mustard, a clove of garlic, salt, and pepper, and you have a dressing that's genuinely healthier than anything in a bottle, low-fat or otherwise. If you prefer bottled dressings for convenience, look for ones made with olive oil or avocado oil, where oil is listed as one of the first ingredients. Avoid anything that lists sugar, high fructose corn syrup, or modified food starch near the top. Your salad is supposed to be a nutritional powerhouse. Don't let the dressing diffuse it. Real cheese is one of the most nutritionally complete foods that exists. It's a source of high-quality protein, calcium, phosphorus, vitamin K2, and conjugated linoleic acid, a fatty acid that research suggests may actually support healthy body composition. And then there's reduced fat cheese, or worse, fat-free cheese product. Let me explain what happens structurally when you try to make low-fat cheese. Cheese gets its texture, its meltability, its flavor, and its satisfying density from fat. When you reduce the fat significantly, especially in processed cheese products, manufacturers have to add a laundry list of additives to compensate. Cellulose powder to replace bulk, carrageenan and gums for texture, emulsifying salts, extra sodium to boost flavor that the missing fat used to provide. The result is not really cheese in any meaningful sense. It's a highly engineered product that resembles cheese visually, but behaves differently in your body. The saturated fat in real cheese has been demonized for decades, largely based on research that has since been substantially revised and challenged. More recent nutritional science distinguishes between naturally occurring saturated fat in whole foods, like full-fat dairy, and the industrial trans fats that were actually driving cardiovascular disease. Naturally occurring saturated fat in cheese, consumed in reasonable amounts, is not the metabolic villain it was made out to be. What is a metabolic problem is the chronic, low-grade inflammation driven by ultra-processed food additives, the very additives used to make low-fat cheese work. Chronic inflammation is increasingly understood as a root driver of metabolic syndrome, abdominal fat accumulation, insulin resistance, and the overall metabolic slowdown that accelerates in your 60s. In other words, the fake cheese you're eating to avoid fat may be doing more inflammatory damage than the real cheese you're avoiding. There's also a satisfaction factor that matters more than people acknowledge. Full-fat cheese is deeply satisfying. A small amount, an ounce of sharp cheddar, a wedge of Parmesan, feels like enough. It triggers your satiety signals. Low-fat cheese doesn't do that. People eat more of it to feel the same level of satisfaction, which often means consuming more calories, not fewer. What should you do instead? Eat real cheese in moderate portions. An ounce or two of genuinely aged, full-fat cheese, sharp cheddar, manchego, Parmesan, Gouda, is far better for your health and your hunger management than 3 or 4 slices of processed reduced-fat cheese product. The key word is quality over quantity. A smaller amount of real food beats a larger amount of engineered food every time. This one hits close to home for a lot of my older patients, because so many people over 60 start their morning with coffee, and many of them are adding something problematic to it without realizing it. Let's start with low-fat flavored milk. When whole milk is skimmed to produce low-fat or skim milk, the fat is removed, but the result is thin and watery. To compensate for the lost body and creaminess, many commercial low-fat milk products add powdered milk solids. Here's the concern with powdered milk solids. The process of spray drying milk to create the powder exposes the cholesterol in the milk to oxygen and heat, creating what are called oxidized cholesterol compounds. Animal and some observational human studies have suggested that these oxidized cholesterol compounds may be more problematic for arterial health than regular dietary cholesterol. While the research is still evolving, it's a meaningful distinction worth being aware of. Additionally, removing the fat from milk increases its relative concentration of lactose, milk sugar, which means skim milk can actually produce a higher glycemic response than whole milk. Now, coffee creamers are a larger concern. Many of the most popular coffee creamers, the fat-free or sugar-free flavored varieties, contain a combination of hydrogenated vegetable oils or palm oil, corn syrup, artificial flavors, carrageenan, and sugar alcohols or artificial sweeteners. Some contain partially hydrogenated oils, which are a source of industrial trans fats, the same fats that the FDA moved to ban from the food supply because of their well-documented cardiovascular harm. And here's the thing about creamers specifically. A lot of my patients over 60 are drinking 2, 3, or even 4 cups of coffee a day, and they're using creamers in each one. Each serving might only be a tablespoon, but across 4 coffees, that adds up to significant daily exposure to refined carbohydrates, artificial fats, and industrial additives. Coffee is actually a health-neutral to mildly beneficial beverage for most older adults. But what you put in that coffee can completely undo any benefit and add a hidden stream of metabolic disruption to your day. What should you use instead? For milk, whole milk in a small amount is preferable to low-fat milk with powdered milk solids. Alternatively, unsweetened almond milk or unsweetened oat milk are reasonable options. Just check the label for added sugars, because many flavored versions have surprising amounts. For coffee, a splash of real heavy cream contains virtually no sugar, is low in lactose, and has a rich flavor that means you need very little of it. Or try full-fat coconut milk from a can, the kind with 1 or 2 ingredients, not the refrigerated sweetened version. Your morning coffee is a habit. Make sure the habit is working for you, not against you. For our last food, I want to take you back to 1992. That was the year Snackwell's cookies hit grocery store shelves. They were low-fat, they were marketed as healthy, and they sold so well that stores literally couldn't keep them in stock. People lined up to buy them. And researchers noticed something fascinating and troubling. Studies conducted during the Snackwell era documented what became known as the Snackwell effect. When people believe a food is low-fat or healthy, they eat significantly more of it. In one famous study, people consumed nearly twice as many cookies when they were labeled low-fat compared to when no label was present, even when the cookies were identical. But the Snackwell effect is only half the problem. The other half is what these products are actually made of. When you remove fat from crackers, cookies, and chips, you lose everything that makes them palatable and filling. So manufacturers compensate with a very specific formula: refined white flour, sugar, artificial flavors, salt, and a range of texture agents and emulsifiers. This combination creates what food scientists call hyper-palatable food, food engineered to be maximally pleasurable and to override your normal satiety signals. The interplay of refined starch, sugar, salt, and artificial flavors lights up the dopamine reward pathways in your brain in a way that whole foods simply don't. And critically, without fat, there is no natural break on the craving cycle. Fat normally helps trigger the release of satiety hormones like cholecystokinin, which signals your brain to stop eating. No fat, no break signal. So you eat one serving, and then another, and then you've eaten the whole box, and you're somehow still not satisfied, and you wonder why you have no willpower. You have normal willpower. The food was designed to defeat it. For adults over 60, this matters doubly. As I mentioned earlier, your satiety hormone signaling is naturally less sharp than it was in your younger years. You're already working with a slightly blunted stop eating signal. Hyperpalatable low-fat snacks exploit that vulnerability in a very direct way. And then there's the metabolic impact. These snacks are essentially rapid delivery refined carbohydrate systems. They spike blood sugar fast, they drive insulin release, and for someone with any degree of insulin resistance, which again is very common after 60, they contribute directly to fat storage, particularly around the abdomen. What should you do instead? A small handful of mixed nuts, walnuts, almonds, pecans. Yes, nuts are high in fat. That fat is why a small portion satisfies you for hours and actually supports cardiovascular and brain health. A piece of real cheese with apple slices. A hard-boiled egg. Celery or bell pepper with a tablespoon of natural almond butter. These are not deprivation foods. They're real foods that work with your physiology, not against it. I think it's worth stepping back and understanding how we got here. Because if you're over 60, you grew up being told that fat, dietary fat, was the enemy. You were told it clogged your arteries. You were told it made you fat. And for decades, every official guideline, every food label, and every doctor reinforced that message. That idea came largely from the work of a researcher named Ansel Keys in the 1950s and 60s, who proposed a connection between dietary fat and heart disease. His research was influential, some would say disproportionately so, and it shaped American dietary policy for the better part of 50 years. The problem is the science was incomplete, and the solution that emerged, replace fat with carbohydrates, has turned out to have profound negative consequences for public health, particularly for older Americans. When the food industry reformulated products to be low-fat in the 1980s and 90s, they replaced fat with refined carbohydrates and sugar. And the data shows that over that same period, rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome in older Americans climbed steadily. Now, none of this means that all fat is good, or that you should eat unlimited amounts of anything. The picture is nuanced. There are fats, like industrially produced trans fats, that are genuinely harmful. There are oils, like highly refined vegetable oils, whose high omega-6 content and instability under heat create oxidation concerns. But the foundational principle that dietary fat is inherently dangerous and that removing it from food makes it healthier has not held up to scientific scrutiny. And for your body specifically, at 60 and beyond, what we know about insulin resistance, metabolic slowing, and satiety signaling points clearly in one direction. Whole food fat, consumed in reasonable amounts, is far preferable to the refined carbohydrate and additive cocktail that replaces it in low-fat products. There are three mechanisms through which low-fat foods cause weight gain in older adults, and I want you to remember these. Mechanism 1. Sugar and refined starch replacement spikes blood sugar, drives insulin release, and promotes fat storage, especially visceral belly fat, in a body that is already less insulin sensitive than it was at 40. Mechanism 2. The removal of fat eliminates the primary trigger for your satiety hormones. Without that signal, your brain doesn't register that you've eaten enough, and you consume more total calories throughout the day. Mechanism 3. Ultra-processed additives used to replace fat, thickeners, emulsifiers, industrial starches, artificial flavors, promote chronic low-grade inflammation, which is directly linked to metabolic slowdown, abdominal fat accumulation, and the overall difficulty losing weight that is so common after 60. Understanding these three mechanisms changes how you look at a food label. The question is no longer, how much fat does this have? The question is, what did they put in instead? I don't want to leave you with just a list of things to avoid. Let me give you a practical framework for navigating the grocery store after everything we've discussed. Rule number 1, the 3-second ingredient check. Pick up any food product. Ignore the front of the package, the health claims, the green labels, the light and fit and smart branding. Flip it over. Read the ingredient list. If sugar, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, or modified food starch appear in the first 3 ingredients, put it down. These are indicators that fat has been replaced with something worse. Rule number 2. Fat is not your enemy at 60. Ultra-processing is. Healthy fat from whole foods like nuts, avocado, olive oil, eggs, full-fat dairy, and fatty fish is not what's driving weight gain and metabolic dysfunction in older Americans. The research is increasingly clear on this. What is driving it is ultra-processed food, refined carbohydrates, and added sugar. Reframe your internal alarm system accordingly. Rule number 3. Stick to the perimeter. This is old advice, but it holds up. The perimeter of most grocery stores is where the real food lives. Produce, meat and seafood, dairy, eggs. The center aisles are where the boxes and packages live, and boxes and packages are where low-fat marketing thrives. The less time you spend in the center aisles, the better. Rule number 4. When in doubt, ask, would my grandmother recognize this as food? Full-fat Greek yogurt? Yes. Low-fat flavored yogurt in a squeeze tube with cookie pieces? Probably not. Natural peanut butter? Yes. Reduced fat peanut butter with 17 ingredients? No. This isn't a perfect rule, but it's a useful gut check. One more thing. I am not telling you to go eat unlimited saturated fat, or to add butter to everything, or to stop reading labels entirely. I'm telling you to read the right part of the label, and to stop letting the words low fat and light and diet function as automatic approval signals in your brain. Your body at 60 needs good protein to preserve muscle. It needs healthy fat to regulate hormones, absorb fat-soluble vitamins, and trigger satiety. It needs fiber from vegetables and whole foods for gut health and blood sugar regulation. What it does not need is more refined carbohydrates dressed up in green packaging. Let me quickly recap the 6 foods we covered today. Number 1. Low-fat flavored yogurt, loaded with added sugar that spikes blood glucose and drives hunger. Number 2. Reduced fat peanut butter, fat replaced with maltodextrin, a starch with a higher glycemic index than table sugar. Number 3. Low-fat salad dressing, removes the fat you need to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins in your salad. Number 4. Low-fat and processed cheese, fat replaced with fillers and additives that promote inflammation. Number 5. Low-fat flavored milk and diet coffee creamers, hidden sources of sugar, oxidized compounds, and industrial additives that compound daily. Number 6. Low-fat snack foods, engineered to be hyper-palatable, to bypass satiety signals, and to deliver refined carbohydrates at speed. The common thread: in every single case, removing fat means adding something else, and that something else is worse for your body at 60 than the fat it replaced. I'll leave you with this. At 60, your body is not broken. It is not failing you. It is simply responding, predictably, consistently, to what you're feeding it. Feed it real food, with real fat, real protein, and real nutrients, and it will reward you. The food label is not your friend. The ingredient list is. If this video changed how you think about the foods in your kitchen, do me a favor. Hit that like button and share this with someone you care about who might need to hear it. As always, check with your own physician before making significant dietary changes, especially if you're managing diabetes, kidney disease, or cardiovascular conditions. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim. Thank you for watching Senior Health Review. I'll see you in the next video.